Welcome to the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. I'm Peggy Farron. Today we're going to be talking about licensing your photography for book covers with Jenna Martin. The Understand Photography Show is a podcast, and we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, however you listen to podcasts. We come out at 4 p.m. The episodes come out at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays every week. We also publish on YouTube and on Facebook at 4 p.m. on Fridays every week. So you have 3 different ways to either watch or listen to the Understand Photography Show. Our website is understandphotography.com. And check it out. I mean, we've got tons of good articles. Our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. So we've got, I don't know, almost 200 articles on there, I believe, all trying to explain photography in the simplest terms possible. We offer online classes, all kinds of things, but just check out our website. When you get to the website, you'll see right on the cover, it says, on the front page, it says, click here for freebies. Click there and, choose something or everything if you want to download how to get tack sharp images every time. What kind of camera should I buy? What do I need to know to become a proficient photographer? We have 30 unique and practical gifts for photographers. I forget, we have quite a few different downloads or videos. And in exchange, you are signing up for our mailing list. We send out 1 newsletter a month. And it's got photo tips as well as what's happening with Understand Photography. My guest today is Jenna Martin. Jenna Martin is a fine art photographer based in Billings, Montana. She specializes in underwater portraiture photography, which is really interesting, very unique, especially for someone who lives in Montana where it's cold. Anyway, Jenna has, for many years now, been licensing her photography for book covers, and she makes a decent living at it. So she's going to teach us her tricks in this episode of the Understand Photography Show. Welcome, Jenna.
Hi.
Thanks for being on the show.
Of course, good to be here.
Now give our audience the short bio of Jenna Martin.
So the short bio would be I am an underwater and fine art photographer, and that's probably the shortest version you can get. I license images for book covers, and I do a lot of fine art print sales, and then I write on the side for a living too. So it's usually those 2 things.
Okay, and you live where?
I live in Montana.
Wow.
Yeah, not the ideal place for an underwater photographer, but.
So do you do all your work inside, like an indoor pool?
No, I shoot a lot in the lakes out here, it's glacier water, so it's freezing, but that's kind of where we got to shoot. There's a couple people I know that have pools, so sometimes I can borrow one here and there, but for the most part, yeah, it's outdoor at the lakes, and it's really cold, but that's just the conditions we have.
Oh my gosh, I would never do that. I don't like to be cold. Are you from Montana all your life?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm definitely used to it. Every time I've ever gotten to shoot in the ocean, it feels like bathwater. It feels amazing. It's a lot warmer than it is here, for sure.
Wow. Now you have a pretty good career selling your photographs to use as book covers, which is something I never even thought about, which is really, really cool. So how did you get into that?
Well, I've always been writing on the side, and so I tend to know a lot of authors and a lot of people in kind of the publishing industry, and really it was just a author friend of mine that said, hey, can I use one of your photos for my book cover? And I thought, sure. I don't even know if I charged him for it or not. And I just let him use my photo. And after that, I kind of started thinking about it, because all of my photography has been in the fine art realm. And so I thought, this must be something that these are used for. And when I started thinking about it, a lot of these book covers, they are very fine art or fantasy or, kind of abstract photographs. They're not just your typical wedding portrait. And I thought this might be an interesting just venue to explore. And so that was probably how I started, was just an author friend asked, and I started kind of looking into it a little bit more.
Okay. And how did you look into it? I mean, you just do a
I
Google
just started
search?
Googling it. Yep. Yep. I just started looking on Google and was wondering if this is a thing. And yep, it's licensing. It's just another form of licensing. There's a million forms of licensing, and this just happens to be one of them. So yep, started kind of going down that route and contacting publishers and contacting authors and just feeling out how this whole thing worked.
Okay, so how did you decide on the publishers and the authors to contact?
Well, I learned pretty quickly that the publishers are the ones to contact, that when you're
Okay.
contacting the authors, they have hardly any money. They're just trying to get their book published in the first place. So I learned pretty quickly that if you were going to make any money on it, it was usually the publisher route, and any of the authors that for the most part were making pretty good money, a lot of them were already signed with agents or publishers. And so that was the route I decided to go. Now I know self-publishing is a little bit different. So that might be a little more lucrative. I just haven't looked into independent authors in a while. So I went with the publisher route, and honestly, it was just calling. It was a lot of just cold calling. And
On the phone, on the
on
telephone?
the phone, and just saying,
Wow.
hi, this is what I do. Could you benefit from this service at all? And some publishers were like, yeah, we've got a guy in-house who does it, you know, we're good. And then a lot of the other ones had no idea what I was talking about. And so I got to tell them kind of, I said, well, I did this for a friend and I can do this for other authors. And so I started working with them. And now I think, you know, for the most part, most publishers know exactly what you were talking about when you call. So it really just depended on the size of the publishing house, the number of authors they carry. You know, each one is very unique. So they all had kind of a little bit of a different process.
Okay, so if you're calling a bigger company, who do you ask for?
So for the most part, I was going through the website and looking for a creative director. If it had any kind of creative next to their name, any kind of marketing next to their name, I was trying to get a hold of that person. But it's been a lot easier for me and a lot more, I would say, lucrative to work on the mid-level to lower level publishers, just because it's a lot more one-on-one, where the higher level, I found they kind of have a very base rate for what they pay, and they're kind of like, we want this, maybe we'll pay it. It's usually not just you, it's you and several others that are up for the same cover, so it wasn't as consistent. So the smaller publishers have been a lot more consistent and one-on-one working with them. So in the beginning, yeah, I was looking for anything with creative in the title, and then in the smaller publishers, it's kind of like any business where, you know, maybe there's 4 people that work there and they all wear a lot of different hats. So it was just calling any number on the website and kind of explaining what I do and saying, who is the best person to talk to about this? And that's where they would say, oh, it's, you know, Susie, you got to call her. And they'd give me their email or something like that. So that's kind of how it started.
Okay, and so how do you explain what you do to them? Is it mostly the underwater stuff that you sell?
A little bit. I do a lot of, since the other stuff is surreal and fine art, that sells about the same, actually. That stuff takes a lot longer to create, but it used to take a lot longer to create. Now I'm pretty fast at it, so it doesn't take as long as it used to. But I would say a lot of my images across the board probably sell fairly equally, depending on what it is. So sometimes they just go to your website and they can look through the images and say, oh, we want something similar, or they'll ask for, do you have anything from this photo shoot? Like, we love this image. Do you have anything similar to it from this photo shoot? Do you have this same girl but with their eyes closed? Or do you have, you know, they'll ask for something specific. And then the other times they're asking for, they're kind of giving you not necessarily an assignment, but a general idea, where they'll say, this is what the book is about. I just had one lately where the book was about this serial killer going around, and it's like this child serial killer. And so they requested broken toys. You know, if you have, I just needed pictures of broken toys. And so one of my daughters has this little, it's like a rat on a stick. I think it's a kangaroo, but it's like the thing she pushes around. And its head fell off. And I thought, well, this is perfect. take this outside and photograph this headless little thing. So I did that, and I photographed like a teddy bear in a puddle, like I smashed a teddy bear in a puddle. So I was trying to just do all these options, and then I gave them a bunch of options, and they write back and say, we like this one. Do you have any more, or can you just go more that direction? So it's kind of working back and forth. So it goes, sometimes I'll pick an image, and then sometimes it's more of a custom kind of a thing.
Now that didn't happen right off the bat though, right? Did that happen after you developed relationships with them, or
Yeah,
has it always been
sometimes.
that?
I think it more depends with the size of the publisher, and a lot of times when it's an image that they're picking right off the bat, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's when the author gets more say, and the author says, I like that one, I want that one, and that's kind of the end of it. Whereas if some of the smaller publishers, when they're working with the images that I already have, they're kind of like, they're looking for something a little more custom, something that's not already out there, something that's going to set them apart a little bit. So I think it kind of depends on the size and how much say the author has in that final product.
Okay. All right. So you contact the company, publisher, you get the right person, and then what? Then you send them to your website, or how does that work?
Sometimes. So basically, when I'm on the phone with them, it's, you're just saying, this is what I do. I'm a fine art photographer, and I shoot for authors for their book covers. And do you need any kind of a service like that? And they'll usually ask, what kind of work do you do? And I can either give them a link right there on the phone that they can just go to my website and they can see it, or they can say, well, just send me an email with all your stuff. So there's usually, depends on whatever they ask for. If they ask for an email, I'll send them a link to my page. And then in the email, I try to include either a couple different, I'll include like 1 or 2 covers or 1 or 2 mock-ups. I don't always see the finished cover, the final product. Sometimes they just take the image and say it's great, and they pay me, and then a year later it comes out, but I don't know what it looks like. So sometimes I'll just send them mock-ups of, this is what I could possibly do for you, and send that through. And if you hear back, then great.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to get into this business, what should their website look like? What kind of images do they look for? I mean, I guess it's all kinds, like you said, broken toys, but you've got some underwater people.
Yeah, so I would say that their website needs to be something that shows just the quality of photography they can do. Because, I mean, I don't have the photos of broken toys on my website. I don't have photos of trailer parks or photos of, like the random requests that I get. None of them are on there, but I have what I consider my best work. So when they do go to it, they see what I'm capable of. And then that's a lot easier to say, oh, okay, we love this kind of style. And then if they want to work with me further, they're happy with it. So I would still say make sure it's your best portfolio site for sure.
So how many pictures do you think, or how many collections, I guess, should you have?
Well, I have, let's see, maybe 5 collections on mine, 5 or 6.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm always adding more and kind of taking down and adjusting the ones that I do have. But yeah, I'd probably say I have 5 or 6. And I think as long as you have it, as long as it's very easily organized and it's easy to find, because an art website is very different from a client website. A client website, people are looking for the experience of working with you. So if you're a wedding photographer, you've got, your videos of the background and videos of you shooting the client and everyone laughing, and then testimonials, and there's all kinds of this additional stuff on your site and all these different services you offer and all kinds of crap. And on the artist website, you basically have your name, your collections, contact, bio, like it's very, very basic, organized, because galleries, publishers, they aren't looking for testimonials and all this other stuff. They just want to see the photos. So I would say to make sure you have a very clean cut website, and as long as it's well organized and everything is there and it's easy to find and they don't have to search through all this other stuff, then you're good to go.
Okay. All right. So they say, okay, we want to use this picture, but we need more, do they need space for the title and everything like that?
They do, yeah. But a lot of that is you just kind of learn how to shoot like that. So you'll learn how to shoot with negative space in certain areas. So a lot of times when they ask for a photo, I'll do the negative space in 3 different spots where there's like a person at the very bottom, and then there's all this space on top where I think they might put the title. And then I'll do it the opposite, where maybe the person is filling up the entire space, but their shirt and everything is black. So it creates this negative space down below. So I'll shoot it in different ways that they can add text to it later. If they're asking for half a face, sometimes I'll ask for like a profile or split profile or something like that. I'm assuming they're going to have text next to it. So I'll shoot half their face and then leave this giant thing of negative space in case they want to wrap it around the book. So you kind of learn how to shoot in this, like where you look at an image and go, oh, this is where the title should go. This is where the author byline should go. So yeah, they aren't necessarily requesting negative space. Sometimes they do. They'll say, we want this kind of photo. We're going to put the title at the top. But I think for the most part, in my experience, they probably pick the photo they want and then adjust the title and everything afterwards.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. But if they've chosen a picture you've already taken, have you had to doctor it up somehow?
Sometimes. So certain publishers, you just send them the image and they want no edits. They want it cleaned up and pretty much a finished product, but they don't want color, anything done with the color. They don't want any kind of Photoshop stuff, nothing like that, because they have their own graphic designers that are going to do all of that. So it happens a lot where I'll send in, they'll ask for like a portrait, and I'll send in a portrait of someone, and then by the time it makes it to the cover, it's got like glitter all over it, and she's glowing purple, and it's like all kinds of stuff. And I don't do any of that. I just send them the photo, and then they get to do virtually whatever they want with it. So sometimes, sometimes I'll make an edit where they'll say, oh, can we take this tree out of the background, where it's something a little too complex for what the graphic designers know how to do, and I can do that in Photoshop like that. So I'll just take it out and send it back.
Okay, all right. Now with your models, do you shoot models with this intention of selling your work?
Yeah.
So what does your model release look like? What does it say in general?
So it's the same as any model release. It basically just says I can't use them for anything that it's like I can't do a book about, a really touchy subject, a book about abortion or something. I can't put their face on that. So it's a really just kind of your general standard model release. For the most part, I do a common courtesy where if they request a photo and they say, this is the photo we want to use, this is the book we want it to go on, is that okay? I'll usually email the model and say, just so you know, you got picked for this book. Is that okay? I've only had one instance where it wasn't okay, and it was for this really cheesy romance novel. I had a couple that I did a photo shoot with years ago, and I messaged the wife and said, hey, you guys got picked for this like super cheesy romance novel, and she said her husband had died in a car accident previously that year, and she said there's no way she could bear to like walk through a bookstore and see their photo on this cover. And I thought, oh God, yeah, absolutely. So I ended up sending them a couple different options, and they were okay with that. So for the most part, I'll always ask my models, I don't know, I think it's just nice. They're gonna be on something. I think the majority of the time though, it's not their faces that are on the book. It's their hands. It's like their lips. A lot of them is from like the eyes are up and it's just from like the lips down. So it's kind of bits and pieces. It's a person where they're looking away and you can't see their face, or it's just a silhouette. So it's a lot of, you can't actually tell who it is that's on the cover. And most models, they're completely like, if they're identifiable in any way, then that's a little different. But for the most part, like no one knows whose hand it is. So it's never really been an issue.
Okay. Now, do you pay the models, or do you trade for pictures, or
how do you? It depends on the model. If it's a model that has no portfolio and they want to do trade, then we'll do trade. If it's a very well-established model that I need for a higher quality kind of shoot or a really in-depth thing, some of the underwater models that I have, underwater modeling is really tough. So you can't just have someone new be like, I want to try it. It takes a long time for them to get the hang of it. So if it's a special request for an underwater pose in a very specific situation, in that case, I'd probably just pay one of my underwater models to do it because they know what they're doing. So it just depends. Some models want the trade. They want the photos. They think it's fun. It's just one of those things. And then other models want full payment. I think it also depends too, because this isn't something where it's a typical shoot where I pay them because I know I'm going to get paid. A lot of times I have no idea if I'm going to make any money at all. And so if I pay everybody just outright, then I'm just paying for me to do all these photo shoots and hoping I make something eventually. So sometimes it's nice to kind of have the options of, if they're specifically requesting a photo for a book and it's a smaller publisher that they're not going to anyone else, this is for me, it's for this book. In that case, like, I'm okay paying someone. But it's one of the larger publishers and they're like, hey, let's just see what happens. And I tend to hope that I can work with a model who's okay with trade.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering about that, because that could get expensive if you were.
It could get very expensive, you know. And you know, there's some amazing models out there that are absolutely deserving of payment. But I'm usually picking one of my friends and being like, hey, you have red hair. Do you want to go stand over there for me? You know, so it's not really near the in-depth kind of photo shoot that would be a full studio payment photo shoot. It's really just kind of, I see someone at the store and I'm like, oh, you have freckles. I need someone with freckles. Do you want to meet up on Saturday? Can I take a photo of you? So yeah. It's a little hit and miss.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, you know, we give classes here and we trade for pictures with most of the models. Sometimes we get some experienced models. Most of the time, I think it's a good learning experience for the photographers that they have to learn how to pose. Because when you have a professional model, you don't have to know how to do anything.
No, exactly. You just click, and they're flying. And those are the times when it's like, yes, I will pay for that. But when it's, you know, we don't have, it's like where I'm in Montana, I'm not in LA. So we aren't having, like, I don't have professional models all over the place. So in this case, it's mostly friends of mine or, someone that I'll see that has an interesting look that I'll go, oh, you would be perfect for this, you know, project. I think I might get paid. I don't know, but let's try it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, so what's the process once they say, okay, you know, we want this, you know, you to do this kind of photo shoot, and then you said you send them different kind of formats of the pictures.
Well, I would assume. First, before that, so they'll request the photo and actually go back and forth. First of all, to say how much time that would take and the process. So if they request an underwater photo from me in, say, January, there's no pools out here in January. There's like a hotel pool. There's hardly anything. I can't shoot in any of the lakes. And so I have to write back and be like, okay, well, I either have to shoot in the pool and it's going to be more expensive because I have to take some time in Photoshop and edit out the pool lines. I've got to edit out a lot of stuff. Or if you want to fly me out to Florida, I mean, that'd be great. So first it's kind of, they go back and forth with what the photo is that they need. And if it's one of the fine art ones, if they pick one on my website and say, I want one of these, like I have a whole section of fine art where there's objects floating around and they say, we want this. Say, okay, well, that's a little more than one photograph. You know, that's a composite of 40 different photographs. It's going to take a little more. So we go back and forth for a little bit, kind of discussing how fast do they need it? How fast can I do it? And then the price point of these different things.
And can I be nosy and ask you, like, what is the range of prices that you can expect to be paid for a book cover?
Well, it's a lot like every field of photography, where it's all over the place.
Nothing to lots.
It's nothing to lots, yeah. But I would say, on average, I try to stay somewhere around at least the $800 to $1,500 range. If I can stay right around there per book cover, I'm pretty happy. As I said, like a lot of times it's $800, but it's one photo. They're like, go take a photo of a stick, and you send it in. They're like, this is great, and that's it. So, you know, sometimes it's really easy, and then other times they're very specific, and it's back and forth, and we don't like how the sun is there. Can you just change the sun? It's like, no, what? No. So it goes back and forth a lot, and it depends a lot. I would say in the beginning to try and explain what your price is, and then hope they don't keep coming back and making all these adjustments, because I don't like having to add on to price. Most of the time, if I quote someone a price, I'll do that. Like that's what the price is going to be, and no matter what the adjustments are, that's what it is. And it's probably not the best business practice, but that's just how I've always done it. So I try to at least hope for a decent amount. If I can quote them $1,000, I don't mind making the extra edits to sell that kind of a cover.
I think you are making such a good point, though. And, I think this rings true in any kind of photography. You have to have a really, really, really good consultation with your customer. Yeah. If you're a wedding photographer, if you're a book cover photographer, if you're an event photographer, if you're a portrait photographer, what else is there? Anytime you're doing something for a customer, you have to have a really clear understanding. And so do they.
Yeah. And that's a large part of, that's a large part of why I like working with the publishers too, though, is because you have that initial consultation, but then they get it. Like they can talk to the author and they can do that work for you. And the author is like, oh, I want this, and I want these people floating, and I want fire. And they're going to go, look, this is a little above what we can afford to do for you. Like, we can't do that. This is like the photographers that do that kind of thing. It takes a lot of work. It's going to cost some extra money. So I'm not having that same conversation with a new author every time. The publisher kind of takes care of that for me. Oh. So that's definitely one of the benefits of, and plus, it's just like any other customer. If you give them a price point, and as it goes on, they tend to, maybe they're adding a little bit here, adding a little bit there, but you still complete the project and you still have that working relationship. When it's done, you can tell them, say, hey, look, like, you can't do that next time. I give you a price point. It's for this amount of work. You can't just keep piling on and piling on. And it allows you to keep that relationship, but know that the next time you work with them, there has to be some level of standards where they're not going to keep asking you for these additional edits.
Yeah, yeah. Managing the customers and their expectations is a big part of what, like, as any business person, I guess, not just photographers, all of the business people. So how did you shine more so? I mean, is it a competitive business? I have no idea. I never even thought of it until you came into my life.
Yeah, it's a very odd. People ask me, they're like, how do you make money? Like, you don't do client photo shoots. I do this thing you've never heard of. It's fine. So I think, I'm not sure if it's really competitive in the way that most photography is, because like I said, I do underwater portraits, and that's kind of a specific area that I shoot in. I don't run into a lot of other underwater photographers as I'm doing these book covers. But then there's a lot of other ones. Like one of the publishers, they have a guy that specifically does fantasy, where he does a lot of dragons and a lot of fire and a lot of people glowing in the dark. I don't do any of that. So it's kind of competitive in the way, like every other genre, where in general, maybe it is, but once you know exactly what you do and you do that really well, then you do that. And, let the other guys do the dragons. I'm not competing with them. I don't do that. So if there's an author that's writing some fantasy dragon novel, then fine, that's not my client. I tend to do a lot of crime thrillers and, missing persons ones where, it's always people floating in the water on the cover. That's kind of stuff that I tend to do. So, we all have our own little area, and I would say it's the same as every other field of photography. If you're a wedding photographer that does outdoorsy, adventurous clients, then, don't worry about the ones who want to shoot in the studio. That's not your client,
Right. That's so interesting. So now do you give them like a clean picture? And you said that they do a lot of editing often.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll send them a photo, and the final product, it might not even, I might send them a picture of a girl like reaching up, and then the final product will just be the hand. It won't even be, she won't even be in the final, cover. And that just is a conversation between them and the author and whatever design department they have. So, a lot of times, I'm just sending them the photo, and then I'll just see, like, some publishers, they'll send you, when they give you the deposit and they give you the basically final payment, and it kind of looks like an invoice, and it has a tiny little picture next to it of the finished cover. And I'm like, are you sure that's my photo? It
Ah.
doesn't look like what I sent you. But that's kind of part of what you're giving them is the right to, they get to do whatever they want with it. So that was probably the hardest part, letting go of that in the very beginning. Was I wanted to work on these photos and make them perfect because I was doing print sales. So that was my mind frame of selling prints, is making them how I want them to be and how they should be shown. And then they were like, we're going to put glitter and make her eyes glow. And I was like, okay. So yeah, it's been interesting.
So when you say that they make changes, what kind of changes do they make? I mean, do you have to go out and do another shoot?
No. They'll find the photo, they get the one they want, and then they will change virtually whatever they want about it. Like I said, they'll make her eyes glow. They'll make,
when they come back to you, though, when they come back to you and keep adding things onto the job, what are they adding onto the job? Not editing.
It's more like, yeah, they won't ask for another photograph. Once they pick the one, like, you're done for the shoot. You're done with that at all. That only becomes a case if you're working with one of the larger publishers. Some of the larger publishers that I've worked with, which still aren't the big ones, like I've never worked with the big five or anything, but some of the larger publishers, when they send out a request or an assignment, they're not sending it out to just you. They're sending it out to a number of people. So like maybe five photographers, and then they'll narrow it down to 3, or they'll narrow it down to 2, and then they'll give you like a second assignment. Say, hey, we like this. Can you do a little more? And they'll give you like a little bit more on top of it. So then you got to go back out and, try and do that same shoot, but maybe do it at night, or do the same shoot, but with them wearing different clothes. They wanted some tweak on it. So that's been the only time where, for the photo itself, you have to keep shooting and constantly shooting to get the right thing. But for the most part, they pick the photo they want, and then either there's some edits in Photoshop they request, but it's usually stuff that the graphic design department just doesn't know how to deal with. So maybe it's like taking out a nose ring, or something like that they add text to it, but they're not going to do face retouching. So it's like certain things like that they might ask for. But for the most part, once they get the photo they want, like, it's theirs, and they go hog wild on it.
Now, one of the things you just said, you said that you might not be the only artist that they give this assignment to. Do you do assignments for no money, like to bid on the job? Okay.
That's why I prefer working with the smaller publishers, because the larger ones, they're giving you these assignments, and it might pay out pretty great, but you're doing a lot of work not knowing if you're going to be chosen or not knowing if you're going to be, it's a lot of maybe I'll get picked kind of a thing. And the smaller publishers, it's just you. They just, hey, we need this photo. You're getting paid for it. So it's a lot more security. So I was working with some of the larger publishers, I would say, when like when I didn't have kids and I could just wing it and hope I'd get paid. But yeah, now I've got a couple kids and a mortgage, and it's a lot. It feels better for me to work with the smaller ones who offer, it's not me and someone else. They go to me. It's a consistent kind of a paycheck. There's also, though, gosh, what was I going to say? I don't remember. Maybe it'll come back to me.
That happens to me sometimes in the middle of a sentence. Okay. So now this is a form of licensing, you said.
Yeah.
So do they make the licensing contract, and how do you not get screwed?
So good question. The best way to not get screwed is to have an attorney look it over, for sure. But I would say, yeah, the most part, they have their licensing agreement, and it was tricky in the beginning because a lot of times you're giving up copyright. Like they'll pay more for it, but you're giving up the copyright, which is something that photographers it's very drilled into our heads. You do not give up that copyright. The image is yours. But this is something where, if it's a picture of a shoelace, I can give up that copyright. I'm fine with that. If that means a higher paycheck and that means it's going to be licensed for distribution and stuff like that, I'm fine with giving up that copyright. So it was a little antsy kind of looking at the contracts and seeing that sometimes that's given up. Sometimes it's not. If it's a portrait, usually you don't got to give up copyright. But if it's like a larger author and it's going to be for more distribution, they want to make sure that picture is not ending up anywhere else. So it is an exclusive photo for that author, for that book cover. And yeah, I would say read over the contract really well. If you can have a lawyer look it over, that's ideal. But most of them, all the ones I've worked with have been really great about answering whatever question you might have. So if there's a section you're going, I'm kind of unsure about this, there's always someone on the phone that will say, oh, okay, well, that just means this, this, and this. If it makes you feel any better, we can change it. For some of the lower level publishers, like the copyright is in the contract. But if it's a certain photo that I'm like, oh, I love this photo, I really don't know if I can give up the copyright. You're okay to license it, but I don't know if I give it up. A lot of times they'll go, we can probably work with that. So, I mean, if they absolutely do not negotiate on their contract at all, I think it's a personal decision of what you want to give up and, what it comes down to.
Yeah, yeah. But reading it is very important.
Yes.
Like you said.
Yes, definitely.
But I know with most, especially if it's a smaller company, you can say, hey, do you mind if I scratch out this line? And
yeah,
people do it to me all the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because I have in my contract. Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things in my portrait contract is that I can use their image for marketing purposes, and some people don't want you to, and they just cross it off, and okay, I won't use that one.
Yep.
So, in fact, I mark it on the folder so I don't forget, because
exactly.
How are you gonna remember that? Jeez. All right, what else? What else can we talk about book covers? What am I missing?
Ooh,
I have a lot of notes here, but how long have you been doing this?
Oh gosh, maybe 7 years.
Wow,
so not
that's
like
a long time.
Yeah, like not crazy long. Like I just talked to a publisher the other day. So 2 of the publishers that I work with are both going under out of business in this coming year. And so the last week even, I was like, okay, time to make the cold calls, time to start talking to people. And one of them were like, oh, we have an in-house guy. He's done it for 40 years. I thought, oh no, I haven't done it for 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's been it's been good working with, especially like the smaller publishers. Usually like these other 2 that are going to be, they notified me they'll be going out of business this year. Usually because I have a good relationship with the editors there and the creative directors there, they'll move on to other publishing jobs, and then I still have that contact. So they'll message me and say, hey, I'm working here now if you want to, send in some stuff. So people, they kind of move around, and you just kind of hope to stay with the people that you like working with for the most part.
And that's just good business. If you make a good reputation for yourself, your name gets out there. It takes time in the beginning, but then once you get established, it gets easier and easier, hopefully.
Well, and that's why it's so important to have that, where you can be a stickler and say, look, I'm doing it for this price and I'm not going to do any extra unless you pay me more. And that's fine. But it's been better for me if I'm a little flexible, and after the job is done, be like, okay, look, next time this doesn't cost $1,000. This costs $2,000 or more. So like figure it out on your end. And then they're like, that's fair.
I think you have to find that happy medium. But I think, as you were saying, having that good consultation up front, usually you can come in pretty close.
Yeah, definitely.
You both have a good understanding of the work because you talked it through, and you come up with the price. And usually, not always, but that will help anyway.
I'll get messages sometimes. Well, they'll say, I know this is a little under your price point or your price range, but the author loves your work. Like the author is like a fan. They've been following you forever. This is their dream to have like your image on their book. And I'm like, fine. Like, I'll do it. So
I've done that too. Favors for regular customers or whatever.
Yeah.
So how many covers would you say you've done? Do you know?
Oh God. I have no idea. I mean, 7 years worth. So quite a few.
Okay. So what about in the last year?
So in last year I do probably, so the last year I've had a baby and it's been busy. If I can stay around 10 to 15 a year, I'm okay with that. My goal is usually if I can get signed on for a series, that's where it can start to pay a little bit more, because, you know, if you can start doing, instead of one book, you're doing a trilogy or you're doing 6, that becomes a little more beneficial. You're licensing out for a lot more images for a way longer period of time. And I've found that, at least the ones that I've done, the trilogies or the series, they tend to sell more than the one-off books. Or that's just my own experience, though that might not be correct in terms of statistics. But the ones that I've worked with, they tend to sell a little bit more. So if I get signed on for a series, usually just the one image price is a little bit better than just that same, if that was doing that for a one-off kind of a book.
Okay.
So yeah, so I kind of,
so instead of $800, you make $1,200, but you make $1,200 times 3.
Compounding, yeah. And in the contract too, a lot of times you'll have it that says, you know, if this author hits a certain, if they hit a certain number of sales, or if this book is licensed for a movie, or if this book, you know, gets something like that happens, that my image is used for the book. If you want this image to also be all over the movie and stuff, that's a totally separate negotiation we're going to have to go through. So this isn't like, you know, you get the image for everything they could ever possibly use it for. It is for distribution and marketing materials for this specific book. And then if something gets picked up, gets turned into something else, then yeah, we get to renegotiate, which, I mean, they're excited about. That's their goal too, is to, you know, sell these books for their authors. So that's never an issue.
So in the contract, when you give up the copyright, though, you still...
Yeah, so that's where you're at. You're kind of looking at, you know, if I'm going to give up the copyright of my shoelace photo, that's usually when that happens, it's for an author who has sold, it's like their debut novel. They've never sold any books. They've got 10 followers on Instagram. And it's more a matter of, can we just have this, like, can we just have this shoelace photo and not worry about it? And that's where I really don't mind too much. But yeah, that's part of it, is looking into it and knowing, like, are they paying you enough for that copyright for that image? Usually if it's something like a photo of a shoelace, I know that is not the image they're going to use to promote a movie. You know, that might be on the cover, but it's not going to have an image of a shoelace and then Christopher Nolan, you know, underneath it, directed by. It's not going to have that. So I'm pretty okay with that. If it's what I mean. Like, if it's a fairly striking image and I know that I did a good job on this, that's where I'm a little more clinging to the copyright, and I'm probably not going to give that up.
In that case, you would just say, I'm licensing it for this book only. Okay.
Yeah, I'm licensing it for this book. And you know, like, they can make, it's usually at a certain size, so they can make posters, they can run advertisements for it, stuff like that. So it's usually that realm. And then, yeah, if it hits a certain size, if it sells a certain amount of copies, or if gets picked up for some kind of alternate distribution, whether that's a TV show or a movie or anything like that, then that's like a separate negotiation. And usually there's a clause in the contract that'll say, if this happens, you know, we revisit this contract.
Okay. All right. And if that clause is not in there, you should probably get it in there, it sounds like.
And you ask, just ask about it. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I handwrite things in contracts all the time. Or cross things off.
I totally did. When I do print sales, it's a lot of gallery contracts. It's the same thing where you're, you know, writing. I was always writing in if something happens to a piece of a print while it's in their care, they have to cover that cost because they want me to cover it. And I tried to one time to file an insurance claim, and they're like, you're filing an insurance claim for a print that wasn't in your possession that you haven't seen for like 6 months. It was a huge pain. So that turned into a contract thing of every new gallery I was in going, we're going to add this to the contract.
Yeah, galleries, you have to really be careful. All right, so what if somebody wants to get into this type of photography? Oh, wait, I have another question. I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
Do you know what's the ratio of book covers where they use photography versus graphics?
Oh, gosh. I do not know that off the top of my head, but I know that that happens sometimes where I'm working with a specific publisher, and then if that position, that person leaves and someone else comes in, that new person, in order to cut costs, they might say, look, we're doing all books or text now. It's all going to be straight through our graphic design department. We don't want any more photos in the back, and my work just drops off, and I've got to go, find another publisher to work with. Yep, get back on the phone. And so I know that it happens a lot where to cut costs, they'll just have the graphic design, do. I mean, I think, gosh, James Patterson always has like these giant texts on his books. And so some of them, they always have something to them, but I really don't know the ratio of it. I know that there's definitely a difference between there's the photographer and then there's the ones that do illustrations. So a lot of the children's books are all, the teddy bear illustration or something like that. That's totally something different. And then there is just the graphic design text kind of novels. So I really don't know how many is in each category.
I don't know either. I just thought of it.
Yeah, I'd like to know the answer to that.
So if somebody does want to get into this business, what are some tips that you can give them? Like this. Tip 1, 2.
Tip 1, 2. Okay. Well, I would say tip number 1 would be definitely to study the kind of imagery that you're willing to produce, because like I said, you're not just shooting photographs. Like, you start to figure out where the negative space needs to be and how you shoot to allow for that negative space, where the author's byline goes. When you're shooting landscape portraits, you start to kind of see it as, okay, here would be the portrait and it would wrap around the back cover. So what would the back cover look like? What would the front cover look like? And that's your 2 sides of that photo. So it's kind of studying book covers themselves and realizing, okay, this is the image they use, this is how it's taken and set up, and this is why it works. So I think that would be number 1, is to really study how it's done. Number 2 would be this, to kind of get over this little fear of rejection. We all have this little fear of rejection for stuff, but when you're making these cold calls, it's literally just like, it's a cold call. You're hi, this is my name. Do you want to buy what I'm selling? That's what it is. And it's not fun. It's never fun to make those calls and to never hear back from people again. But the advice I would give is, when you are calling people and they don't want to work with you, so they just don't write back, or you submit your proposal or you submit something and you don't hear anything again, we tend to think, oh, like, if they're going to associate my name with this work and they didn't like this work, so now they think that I'm a bad photographer. Let me tell you something. The second you send something and they don't like it, they've already forgotten your name. They've completely forgotten who you are. They couldn't care less. They only remember who is good and who they want to work with. And so, like, you just have to kind of look past that and start submitting, send the email, make the call. If you hang up and they're like, oh, it's just someone wanting to do this, but we already have someone, they have already forgotten your name. They have no idea who you are. So there's no point in beating yourself going, oh, they didn't like me and they're going to make fun of me with their friends. No, they're not. They don't care. So I would say that would definitely be tip number 2, is just to realize that it's not personal. Just submit, go through. If they don't like it, they already forgot you. Resubmit next year. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
And maybe tip number 3 would be to get really good at making these edits. So when I'm doing the surreal style kind of photography, those are composite photos. It's a lot of Photoshop. When I first started, it would take me a week, 40 hours to do that kind of work. Now I can do it in an afternoon. I'm really good at it now. I know my way around Photoshop like it's nobody's business. So when they ask for these edits, it's a 10-minute edit instead of a 3-day kind of an ordeal. Mm-hmm. Which makes me a lot more valuable, because if it's a 3-day thing, I have to charge more. I can't keep doing, 3-day, week-long edits. Then I have to charge more. If it's a 10-minute edit, I can maybe not charge for that and still have that relationship and get it back to them on time. So I would say, to figure out, how to use Photoshop, figure out how to do this kind of stuff in case they just send back and ask, can you just take that guy in the background out? Like, you need to know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that was 3. Got any more?
3. Oh,
you don't have to have more, but
those are my 3 big ones, I would say, for sure. Oh, number 4, read more books and actually talk to authors. This is, I think people forget that we always tend to think like photography is an art form and there's so much you have to learn and so much that goes into it. It's the same way with writing. And these authors they're coming to you with these photos, this is their baby. They have been working on this thing for years. So talk to them, understand what they're going through. If they aren't crazy about your image, literally, they've been working on this book for 5 years. Let them be picky. It's fine. Yeah, I think that would be another one. Read their books, talk to the authors, understand kind of their side of things and where they're going through. And number 5, I would say, don't be afraid of the publishers. These are people who, they love books, they love art, they love this stuff. These are kind of your people. They're not there to screw you over. They're not there to, do anything sketchy or try and run a fast one by you. They're excited. They want to get a book published. They want the best cover that's going to sell the copies they can. They have the best intentions at heart. So same thing. If they're being a little bit picky, it's because they've probably been working with this author for years and working them through the process, and they're not going to slack off when it comes to making sure that, the cover, what people see firsthand, that is perfect. So yeah, I would say, you got to trust the publisher a little bit and know that they have the author's best interest and they're trying to do what's right. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. What about any mistakes that we should really avoid? Turn this. I got some weird light coming in on my face now. The light's changing quickly.
My light's going to disappear here soon.
Yours is going away. Mine's coming in my face.
Yeah.
And as photographers, we're sensitive about that.
I know. I know. Yeah, mistakes, I think mistakes would be early on just being really overly critical of your images and, thinking like, oh, I don't know if they're going to like this or how it's pictured or how it's framed. They are going to change it. Just send it to them. Wondering like, I don't know if her hand's in the right position. If they don't like it, they'll tell you. Just send them the photo and stop, worrying about, like you just said, we're photographers and we're going, well, it's a little dark in the upper left corner. Don't care. Like, send it.
Yeah.
They might crop that whole section out anyway. You have no idea what they're going to do with that image. So you might be stressing over something that no one else cares about at all. And otherwise, I think, it's a pretty fun industry in that there's a lot of creativity, a lot of going back and forth, a lot of customizing. It's a fun challenge for someone to call you and say, hey, I need photos of broken toys. Go out and do broken toys and make it look cool. And you're like, all right, I've never photographed that. Let's see what happens. It's really fun. And I think if you take it a little bit too seriously, it can kind of ruin some of the fun to just go out and take these photos and take them at weird angles. Like, I was in the street, shoving a teddy bear in a puddle, taking photos of it. It's not what you would normally do in a photo shoot, but to just have fun with it and play with it and just see what happens,
I think that's great advice. Now, what's coming up for you next? Now, you were also selling your artwork as prints. You're selling.
Yeah. Oh, which, by the way, totally as a side note, but if you are selling your work as prints and you're licensing them as book covers, for the most part, that's okay. You just have to go through the contract. So I can sell a print as a fine art print, and then I can also license that as a book cover if I want to. It just depends on the contract for the publisher and a few other things. But if you're like, I got to do one or the other, you don't. You can do both.
Okay.
So I sell prints through my website. So I have a lot of what's that?
And your website is?
Oh, it's just jennamartinphotography.com.
Okay.
So I sell prints there, and I usually sell them in a few different galleries. So right now I'm in a gallery here in downtown Montana. It's called Underground Culture Crew, and I've got some of my prints up there. And then I run the Creative Chaos podcast, which is just a podcast for artists. I talk a lot about fine art photography because that's kind of what I do. So that we get to interview, people that are watercolor artists, and I interviewed a floral designer. So we get to talk to just kind of people in the art world and talk about the business of it. But yeah, it's definitely fine art photography heavy. And then I'm writing my own book. I have just a fiction novel that I've been working on that has nothing to do with photography or anything like that. It's just a personal side project. And, I've always been in the author world anyway. And so it always just kind of was a natural thing to, I'm doing these book covers to kind of start writing as well. So.
Will you do your own book cover?
Yeah, I definitely will. But the funniest thing is, as I've done like mock-ups for it, and it's all just text. So I don't even have an actual photo of my own book. Yeah, we'll see.
You'll see.
There's a few photos that I've taken for other like assignments that I've done that I've held on to, that I've thought I really like this one, and I haven't sent that out to anyone or licensed. So I have this tiny little folder with about 10 different images that I'm kind of just collecting them, and they're kind of maybes. So those ones might end up, one of those might end up on it. But right now it's just been text, which is really funny.
Do you have a deadline for yourself?
December 22nd is my deadline to finish the manuscript. So I've been working on it for a while. So I'm making good time. I'm fairly on track right now. So that's to finish the manuscript, and then I've got a couple other deadlines to do the beta reader process and a lot of the other stuff before sending it to an editor. And yeah, it's years to work on these things.
Well, now you get, I mean, I guess you already did, but that makes us all understand why it's so important to have a good cover to these authors.
Exactly.
That's their baby. If they put years into it, oh my gosh.
And then then the publisher is like, what do you think of this? And they go, I hate it. Which is to work that long on it and hate the cover. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. I really learned a lot. I didn't know anything about this world. I mean, I'm just fascinated, and I think it's, you've given a real gift to our audience, because we have a lot of fine art photographers who are trying to figure out ways to make money in their photography, and this is another avenue that I didn't even know about.
Yeah,
I guess I never even thought about it.
It's a really, like I said, I have people all the time that they're like, you're a photographer, but you don't shoot anyone in town, and people are just like, what? Seriously, how do you make money? And I'm like, oh, I do book covers. You've never seen them. Like, it's like I'm just this weird, thing where they have no idea what I do for a living. It's kind of it's a really fun area, and I'm glad I fell into it, because my fine art stuff was very weird. It just wasn't fitting well in any specific. I wasn't taking landscape photos. I wasn't doing fashion. It was kind of just doing some weird surreal stuff. And so when it came to book covers, they were like, oh yeah, this is perfect. We'll pay for it. And I thought, this is great.
That's awesome.
The weirder you want a photo to be, the better. There's someone out there who will use that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for being on the Understand Photography Show.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
I thought it was good too. And we will see you soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, I learned a lot in this episode of the Understand Photography Show. I hope all of you did too. Thanks so much for watching the Understand Photography Show. I'm Peggy Farron. See you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.